The printing revolution. How one invention shattered silence and shaped the modern world. For most of human history, knowledge moved at the pace of a cart, slow, fragile, and often misremembered. Writing, when it existed at all, was a sacred art. Books were treasures, each one a labor of months, even years. A single volume required parchment made from dozens of animal skins, ink mixed painstakingly by hand, and pens shaped from reeds or goose feathers. A scribe would hunch for hours a day under flickering candlelight, carefully copying one line after another. A single slip of the pen could ruin a page, and when that book was finally finished, perhaps after a year, it would still only exist once. If others wanted to read it, someone else would have to start from scratch. Errors multiplied. Margins became cluttered with corrections. Sometimes scribes would get bored and include doodles or sarcastic comments. The process wasn't just slow, it was deeply human, flawed, and terribly expensive. One book could cost more than a farmer's yearly income. They were hoarded in monasteries and royal libraries, locked behind iron chains. The common person never even saw one. Yet long before Gutenberg, there were sparks of innovation. In ancient China, by the Tang dynasty, 7th–10th century, scholars developed woodblock printing. Pages were carved in reverse on wooden blocks and then inked and stamped onto paper. Laborious to carve, yes, but reusable. Entire scrolls could be mass-produced by medieval standards. By the 11th century, a man named Bichet introduced movable-type individual characters made from baked clay. It was brilliant, but it didn't take off. Why? Because of the Chinese writing system. Thousands of characters meant you'd need thousands of tiny, fragile pieces. Organizing and reusing them was a logistical nightmare. Korea, however, made a breakthrough. In the early 13th century, the Goryeo dynasty in Korea developed movable metal type. Craftsmen used bronze to cast characters, a stunning technical feat, centuries before Europe's version. In 1377, a full printed book, the Jikji, was produced 78 years before Gutenberg's Bible. It's now recognized by UNESCO as the world's oldest surviving book printed with metal type. But again, widespread use was limited. Cultural, linguistic, and technological barriers slowed its adoption. Paper in East Asia was abundant, yes, but the need to manage thousands of unique characters remained a massive obstacle. In Europe, where the alphabet used fewer than 30 letters, the potential for movable type was exponentially higher. There were even some whispers of printing innovation in Europe before Gutenberg. The Dutch lay claim to Laurens Janszoon Coster of Haarlem, who, legend says, experimented with movable type in the early 15th century. The tale goes that a disgruntled apprentice stole Coster's tools and ideas, fleeing to Mainz perhaps to join Gutenberg. But no evidence supports the story, and it's largely dismissed as myth. Others dabbled in block printing. In Europe, woodcut images, devotional cards, and even Latin grammars were being printed in the early 1400s. But all these efforts were fragmented, short-lived, or technologically limited. No one had quite cracked the code. Until, in the 15th century, in a quiet workshop in Mainz, Germany, a man named Johannes Gutenberg picked up the thread. Gutenberg was not a monk. He wasn't a scholar, nor a prophet. He was a goldsmith, a man of metal, of precision, of clever fingers and endless depths. He had a dream, one that had driven many before him mad, to make writing reproducible, mechanical, fast. Gutenberg fused old ideas with new mechanics, borrowing from wine presses, experimenting with oil-based inks that wouldn't smudge, and developing precise molds for casting letters in metal. His movable type, tiny, reusable metal letters clicked together like puzzle pieces to form pages. Around 1455, Gutenberg unveiled his masterpiece, the Gutenberg Bible. 1,282 pages of flawless Latin scripture, printed not copied, with startling uniformity and beauty. The lettering mimicked the hand of monks so precisely that many couldn't believe it had been done by machine. But Gutenberg's success was bittersweet. He'd borrowed money from a businessman named Johann Faust. When he couldn't repay the debt, Faust sued him and won. Gutenberg lost his press, his tools, his very legacy. The man who sparked a revolution died poor, unrecognized in his time. But his invention, it spread like wildfire. Within 50 years, more than 20 million books had been printed in Europe. What had taken scribes centuries to reproduce could now be printed in months. Books on medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and of course, the Bible flooded into cities and universities. Knowledge burst free from cloisters and castles. This was not just a technical revolution, it was a cultural earthquake. Think of Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to a church door in 1517. Without the printing press, it would have been a local protest. With it, it sparked the Protestant Reformation. Pamphlets printed by the thousands swept across Europe, igniting religious, political, and philosophical debates. Think of Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler, the birth of the scientific method. Ideas could now be shared, critiqued, improved. For the first time, knowledge had a memory, and the people? They had a voice. And perhaps most profoundly, the Renaissance. The Renaissance was not born in isolation. It was fueled by ink and paper. As classical texts were rediscovered and printed, ideas from ancient Greece and Rome mingled with contemporary thought. Artists, philosophers, and scientists could now learn from each other across borders. Italian humanists read texts printed in Germany. French scholars engaged with Arabic translations printed in Spain. The cross-pollination of knowledge triggered a quantum leap in creativity, innovation, and human understanding. The printing press collapsed the walls of geography and class. Knowledge was no longer confined to the elite. It became accessible, shareable, powerful. And with all this came resistance. Monarchs, priests, and aristocrats feared this new power. If peasants could read the Bible, they could interpret it. If citizens read about liberty, they might demand it. The printing press became both tool and threat, an engine of both enlightenment and revolution. In the centuries that followed, revolutions would quite literally be printed. The American Revolution was inked in broadsheets and Thomas Paine's Common Sense. The French Revolution followed suit, with fiery pamphlets and radical newspapers. The press was no longer just a machine, it was a weapon. From that moment on, tyrants feared printers more than soldiers. And yet, Gutenberg barely made the history books. His name faded for centuries. It was only much later that scholars and historians realized what had truly begun in that small German workshop. Because Gutenberg didn't just invent the printing press, he invented mass communication. From newspapers to novels, manifestos to manuals, science journals to Shakespeare, the printed word built the modern mind. Every school, every library, every constitution owes something to a man who just wanted to make books faster. Today, when we type on keyboards, print documents, or scroll through digital pages, we're living in Gutenberg's shadow. The information age didn't begin with the internet. It began with ink, lead, and an idea so powerful, it reshaped the world. And it all started with a goldsmith, a broken press, and a stubborn dream to multiply the written word.